He lived in my attic for months. Hi everyone. Today, I'm going to tell you a deeply disturbing story, one that I still haven't been able to forget. It's a true story, something that actually happened to me. It's the story of a man who lived silently in the attic above my home for months. And the scariest part is, I had no idea he was there. Stick around and watch till the end. Trust me, the best part is coming, and I truly believe this video will hit you right in the heart. If you feel something, if this video means something to you, please comment number 1 to let me know. And if it's not quite your thing, that's okay too. Just drop a like to help me improve next time. Thank you for being here. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and just felt that something wasn't right? Not a scream, not a knock, just something subtle, like an invisible gaze watching you from the ceiling, or an object that's slightly out of place. A remote you know you left on the table, now lying by the window the next morning. You chuckle to yourself, I must have forgotten. And then you really do forget. Until one night, your phone buzzes at 2:17 a.m., alerting you that motion was detected just beneath the attic hatch. And when you open that video, you'll never believe you were ever alone again. My name is Theo Ramirez. I'm 31. I had just moved from San Diego to a small town, Ellensburg, Washington. I rented this old wooden house on the edge of town, sloped roof, white shutters, a little porch with a rocking chair. Every morning I'd drink my coffee, listen to the wind rush over the hills and think, I'm starting over, in a quieter place. No noise, no honking, no smog. Just me, a few books, my laptop, and the blue sky above. I didn't need anything else, until I started to question the things I thought were mine. It began with small stuff, a protein bar, a pair of gym socks. I figured I forgot, maybe tossed them into the laundry by mistake. Then it was the remote. I left it on the table, but woke up to find it under the sofa. Then the TV switched to HDMI, even though I knew I turned it off the night before. Little things like that, they're nothing if they happen once. But when they happen again and again, like someone's living with you, just not showing themselves, I started to feel like something was off about this house. At night, I'd hear footsteps above me. Not fast, not heavy, but slow, steady, like someone was quietly crawling from one end of the attic to the other, right above my head. One time I even heard a faint cough. Not a raccoon, not rats, a person. I flipped the lights on, grabbed a flashlight, opened the attic door. Nothing, just the smell of damp wood and dust. I told myself, probably pipes, or maybe I've been watching too many crime shows. But deep down, I knew. Something was watching me. And that night, when the security camera said motion detected 2:17 a.m., I picked up my phone and saw a thin man quietly climbing down from the ceiling. Slowly, like he had done it many times before. This is a true story. The story of a stranger who lived right above my head for weeks, and I didn't know until it was too late. I moved to Ellensburg in the middle of November. There wasn't any snow yet, but the cold had already seeped into the wind. That dry, razor-sharp kind of wind that cuts through the slanted rooftops and the empty fields outside town. I remember what it felt like the first time I stepped out here, standing in front of a tiny wooden house off Beach Avenue, watching my breath hang thin in the 40-degree air and thinking, finally, this is what being alone really feels like. The house wasn't big, a sloped roof covered in dry leaves, white-painted trim with patches peeling off, a small porch with a wooden bench, just enough to sit and read on a quiet morning. Inside, 2 bedrooms, a living room, a small kitchen, and an old attic, the kind you can only access by pulling down a folding ladder from the ceiling. At first, I didn't think much of it. The attic was just a place for old junk, right? I didn't even open it once during my first month living here. I chose Ellensburg because it was quiet. After 5 years of working in an office in San Diego, between the honking cars, the whirring AC units, and the never-ending emails, I wanted one thing: peace. Out here, I woke up at 6 a.m., made coffee with a French press, and opened the door to hear the wind sweeping over the hills. I started writing again. Little journal entries, a few half-finished stories from college. I lived exactly the way I used to imagine. Simple, quiet, and alone. I repainted the windows, hung new curtains, planted a few small herbs in the kitchen. I felt like I was reclaiming the space I lived in and the rhythm I lived by. No one telling me to get up. No phone calls at midnight. Every night, I'd lay down on my old wooden bed, wrapped in 2 thick blankets, listening to the soft clicking of the heater and thinking, I'm in a safe place.
And honestly, I used to believe that. But sometimes, in what seemed like perfect silence, I'd feel like something was watching me. Not directly, not clearly, just a cold draft brushing the back of my neck while I was reading, or that urge to turn around, even though no one was there. I told myself it was just the adjustment, getting used to real quiet. After so long in the city, sometimes it's the silence itself that starts to feel suspicious. And then, as winter crept closer, the nights got longer, and the wind began howling through the cracks in the ceiling. I started hearing the first sounds. Sounds I couldn't blame on the wind. Not anymore. Not once I realized. They were coming from right above my head. At first, it was just a few small sounds, like wood creaking, a soft thunk, like something dropping. Once, I could have sworn I heard the sound of fabric, like someone crawling across dusty insulation. I didn't panic, just felt confused. I reassured myself. Probably squirrels or a raccoon. Animals crawl into attics during the winter to find shelter. But then, things started going missing. A protein bar I'd left on the shelf, saw it there the night before, gone by morning. I remember clearly because it was the last one. My favorite kind. I live alone. No guests, no pets. I tore the kitchen apart, checked the trash, even looked through the grocery bags from the day before. Nothing. Maybe I already ate it and forgot, I told myself. A few days later, it was one of my clean wool socks, drying in the room. One sock just disappeared. I searched everywhere. Under the bed, in drawers, between the cushions of the couch. No sign of it. I started doubting my own memory. So I grabbed some sticky notes, wrote simple reminders, finished the bar, washed 3 pairs of socks, put TV remote in the wooden box. A few days later, the note that said, "Put remote in wooden box," was still stuck to the table, but the remote was lying on the window ledge. I never open the living room window in the cold, and I never sit there to read. Then one night I woke up, thirsty, and walked out to the kitchen. When I turned on the light, I saw the dining chair pulled slightly away from the table. Just a little. But I remembered, very clearly, I had pushed it in like always. I've had that habit since I was a kid. I stood there frozen in the kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile. My hands didn't shake, but my throat felt dry and raw. No break-in, no sign of forced entry, nothing missing. Just a chair, slightly out of place. And that's when I realized what scared me wasn't the missing stuff. It was the thought that someone might be quietly living with me but never making a sound, only leaving behind tiny disruptions, just enough to make me question myself. I went online and searched. Things disappearing, living alone, security camera, and I was shocked to find it wasn't uncommon. Strangers living in attics, inside closets, beneath floorboards. There was even a case in Japan. A woman lived on a ceiling shelf for almost a year without the homeowner ever knowing. I closed the laptop, told myself, no way. That's somewhere else. That's someone else's story. I'm not the main character in a true crime documentary. But I still ordered a night vision motion camera, a cheap one. Found it on Amazon, had a sensor, sends movement alerts straight to your phone. I set it up in the hallway right below the attic door, just for peace of mind, just to stop being paranoid. What I didn't know was that only 2 nights later, that camera would show me something I would never be able to forget. The house I live in has only 1 floor, no loft, no second level. Above the ceiling is the attic space, not used for storage, no lighting, no insulation. Just a dusty gap between the roof and the drywall ceiling. The camera sends a motion alert with a soft little ding on my phone. I wasn't expecting it to catch anything. In fact, I was kind of hoping it never would.
But the first night after I installed it, I didn't sleep well. Not because I was scared, but because I started hearing the sounds I used to ignore. At 2:11 a.m., I woke up. I don't know why. No nightmare, no phone buzz, just the feeling of being woken by something unseen. I lay still. I didn't turn the light on. And in the dark, I heard it. Thunk, thunk, scrape, click. The sound of something heavy being dragged across wood. Not loud, but very clear. It came from right above me. My bedroom sits directly under the attic. I didn't move. My whole body froze. My heart didn't pound like in the movies. It beat slow, steady, and each thump felt like a drum inside my head. I stared at the ceiling. I knew it wasn't a rat, not a squirrel, not the wind. I remembered reading something on Reddit once. A woman said she lived alone for 4 months before discovering someone had been sleeping in her attic during the day and sneaking down at night to eat and watch TV. At first, she thought it was just an old house, drafts, bad memory. That night, when I heard a cough, soft and faint, from above the ceiling, I knew. That story wasn't just something I read for fun anymore. I sat up, grabbed my phone, and opened the camera app. No motion alert, no movement. Everything in the frame looked exactly the same. I exhaled, got up, went to the kitchen for water. I noticed the dining chair had been nudged out again. Same chair, same spot. I pushed it back in, went back to my room. Before I shut the door, I looked up. At the attic hatch locked into the ceiling, no sign of it being opened. No marks, no damage. But I started to feel like someone was lying up there, listening to me, just like I was listening to them. The second night, the sounds came back. This time, it was footsteps, slow ones. The insulation was thin, so I could hear every step. No running, no panic. Just a person walking slowly above me. I don't know how long I stayed awake. All I remember is when the sound finally stopped, I grabbed my phone to check the camera. It was 2:17 a.m., and this time, the camera had recorded movement. I opened the app, scrolled to the latest video, and felt my hand tremble slightly as I held the phone. I didn't think I'd see anything. To be honest, I was already bracing myself for "it's just your imaginary cat again." But when the clip started playing, I saw the familiar frame, the hallway in front of the attic door, dimly lit by the infrared glow. And then, the ceiling hatch shifted slightly. It didn't swing open. No sound. It was pushed, gently, from the inside. A shape appeared in the darkness, the head of a man. Messy hair, no hat, no flashlight. He looked around quickly, then began to crawl down like he'd done this many times before. There were no noises, no light, just human movement, incredibly slow and calm in the dead of night. I stared at the screen, completely hypnotized. He didn't walk upright, but stayed low, as if he'd calculated the camera's blind spots. His hand touched the wall, either to steady himself or to make sure nothing fell. Then he slipped out of frame, toward the kitchen. I was still inside the house. Right then, that very moment, he was moving just one wall away from me. I don't remember how I was breathing. My eyes were wide open, and my heart wasn't beating in rhythm anymore. There was only one instinct left in me: lock the bedroom door. I didn't turn the lights on. I didn't dare step out. I backed up, my hands shaking, reaching for the baseball bat I'd hung beside the desk, the one I once thought of throwing out because it looked too dramatic. Now it was the only thing that made me feel like I still had some control. I called 911. My voice was all over the place. I could barely breathe, stammering through my words. Police arrived in under 10 minutes, but for me, those minutes felt like a lifetime. When they walked in, I pointed up at the ceiling. The attic hatch. He just came down. I saw it on video. 2 officers, one tall guy named Barnett, the other younger, pulled flashlights and weapons and motioned for me to stay back. They pulled down the wooden ladder. Barnett climbed first. His flashlight flickered through the attic cracks. Silence. 1 minute, then 3. Then his voice called down. "We found something up here. You should take a look." I climbed up, each rung cold and trembling beneath my feet. The air in the attic was thick, dust, rotting wood, and something old, strangely old. It wasn't a big space, but it had been cleaned out. There was a sleeping bag, a small flashlight, cookie wrappers, a few water bottles, a mini camping stove, and a notebook. Everything arranged, deliberate, with time. Someone had lived up here, not for one night, not because they got lost, but as part of a plan, a routine. I asked them, "Did anyone escape the house?" Officer Barnett looked at me, shook his head, and in that exact moment, I realized something far more terrifying than the 2:17 a.m. clip. He came down from my ceiling. He walked through my home, in the dark, silently, and maybe he'd done it many times before, without me ever knowing. I was still standing in the attic. Officer Barnett's flashlight swept across the corners, that cold white light, thin as a razor blade. The attic ceiling was low. I had to duck my head to move forward. Each step kicked up dust. The smell of dampness, old fabric, and something else. Something that had been here longer than I thought. In the left corner, near the vent, there was a worn-out blanket spread on the floor. On top of it, a faded green canvas bag, a small flashlight, no batteries, a lighter, 2 empty plastic water bottles, a black-covered notebook, the paper edges bent and worn, and most notably, a Ziploc bag holding several faint black and white printed photographs. I knelt down, wearing the gloves the police had given me, opened the photo bag, and the world froze. The first photo was of me. I was standing on the porch, wearing a gray hoodie, holding a coffee mug. The shot was taken from a distance, through the trees, clear enough that I could see, the light reflected in my own eyes. Another photo. I was asleep at the table, the desk lamp dimly lit, the image tilted, like it was taken, through a vent. I couldn't say a word, my hands locked up. I glanced toward the younger officer, who was checking the opposite corner, and I said quietly, "He was watching me, not just when he was inside the house, but even before that." Barnett frowned. He gently lifted a plywood board in the corner. Beneath it was a duffel bag. Inside were 3 sets of old clothes, a fruit paring knife, empty food containers, a toothbrush, and a ring of keys. He held them up, tilting his head at me. "Recognize these?" I nodded. They were the spare keys I had made back in September, a copy I thought I'd lost. The younger officer, Ramos, checked the vent. He turned back, voice lower now. "This spot, it's not just a vent. There's an indentation, like someone's been pressing their face against it often." I stepped closer. And sure enough, the edge of the wooden ceiling, where it met the vent above the living room, had a worn-down groove, as if someone had been pressing their cheek or forehead against it, night after night. Every morning, I'd sit there reading. Every evening, I'd call my friends, talking while gazing out the window. I used to think I was alone, in peace. But in truth, a face was pressed to the ceiling, watching my every move. I turned to look back at the attic. I saw an entire miniature living setup he'd built. No noise, no obvious mess, but it was complete and organized. The police called for forensics. I was asked to come down, sign the evidence hold report. Before leaving the attic, I looked back one last time. That space was never meant for anyone to live in. No electricity, no running water, no room to stand upright. And yet, he lived there, right above me. For how long? No one knows. Before I left the attic, I looked back one last time. That space was never meant for anyone to live in. No electricity, no running water, no room to stand upright. And yet, he had lived there, right above me. For how long? No one knows. The police collected all the items, sent them off for fingerprint and DNA testing. I was invited to the station to give a full report of everything I knew, from the missing protein bar to the 2:17 a.m. video.
And after everything, only one question kept looping in my head. Who was he? And why did he choose my house? 3 days later, I got a call from the local police chief. His voice was calm and even, the kind of tone you hear from someone who's said too many apologies in his life.
We got a fingerprint match from the photo bag and the lighter. Matches a man named Joshua Devlin, 35 years old, homeless, history of mental illness, and the son of Walter Devlin, your neighbor behind the house. I froze. Walter. The man in his 60s. Quiet. Deep-set eyes. Always wore the same old jacket with elbow patches. He once helped me fix the gutter during the rainy season. He once smiled and told me something that now cuts through my memory like a knife. These roofs connect all 3 houses, you know? If someone climbs up from mine, they could walk across the whole row. Back then, I just thought he was talking about how houses used to be built. Now, I'm not so sure. I called the police back. They confirmed. Yes, Devlin had once lived with his father, but had been missing for nearly a year. Local records showed Walter never filed a missing person report, only said he left, didn't want to be found. I asked, why didn't the police investigate sooner? There was a brief silence. Then, we didn't have any clear sign of a crime, and the neighbors said Walter had lived alone for a long time. That night, I looked out my kitchen window and saw Walter standing behind the fence. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the roof. I stepped back, turned off the kitchen light. The next day, the police came back. They searched Walter's house. In the backyard shed, they found an aluminum ladder, a coil of rope, and a dark jacket, exactly like the one in the 2:17 a.m. clip. They asked Walter why he hadn't reported the missing items. He said, I thought he took them when he left. But his eyes, in that moment, didn't look surprised. They looked like someone who had known all along, just didn't want anyone else to know. Officer Barnett leaned in and whispered as they left. We don't have enough to charge him with concealment yet, but my gut tells me Walter isn't a bystander in this story. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of noises, not because of the dark, but because I realized the most dangerous person might not have been the one living above my ceiling, but the one who lived right next door, every single day, in plain daylight. I lay motionless on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the same ceiling where he had once followed my every breath. I thought about the 2:17 a.m. footage, about the black and white photos, about the toothbrush, the hand pressing against the attic beams, and that quiet whisper, these roofs are all connected. I don't remember when I drifted off. Just that, when I woke up, it was 3:12 a.m. The house was so silent I could hear the blood pulsing in my temples. I grabbed my phone. A new habit, checking the camera app. No new alerts, no movement, nothing. But something felt off. There were fewer videos in the log than there had been yesterday. I remembered saving 9 clips separately. Now only 8 remained. I double-checked the timestamps. The one from the night before, around 2:19 a.m., was gone. A chill ran down my spine. I opened the history tab of the camera, a simple feature most people overlook. It logs every action, edits, deleted files, setting changes. And just as I feared, that file had been deleted, manually, from inside the app. I live alone. My phone is locked with a fingerprint. The app doesn't allow auto-delete, and the camera is synced to the desktop Wi-Fi. No one else has access. I stared at the activity log. Delete 2:19 a.m., accessed from local IP. I checked the other cameras around the house. No one came in. No doors were opened. But I clearly remembered. I'd woken with a jolt right around that time. And I also remembered hearing soft footsteps in the hallway. Not loud, not hurried, just someone walking slowly, quietly, past my room. I thought it was a dream. Now, only one thought filled my head. Maybe he never actually left. Or maybe Someone else knew about the hiding spot, and they came back in his place. I shot up, checked every camera, checked the attic hatch, and there it was, the detail that made it hard to breathe. The attic door was slightly ajar, just about half a centimeter, but I knew I had shut it tight, with my own hands, until I heard the click. I called the police. They came, checked everything again. This time, no one was up there, no new signs, nothing. But Barnett looked at me and said, "If the file was deleted from inside the house, and if the hatch was opened and no one saw anything, then maybe you shouldn't sleep here tonight." I packed up some clothes, my notebook, my laptop, put it all in the trunk of my car. That night, I booked a motel 8 miles outside of town. When I shut the motel room door, I didn't turn the lights on. I just stood there, in the dark, listening to the soft hum of the AC. And I asked myself, is silence really peace? Or is it just how the dark prepares itself to return? The next morning, I returned to the old house, as part of an agreement with the police. They were still monitoring, setting motion traps, tracking remote IP logins. But legally, the house was still mine, and I had to check on everything, like a responsible owner. I walked around the house. Nothing seemed unusual. Windows closed, cameras untouched. All files still accounted for. I stepped into the backyard to check the awning and the gate latch, and that's when I saw Walter. He was standing right at the wooden fence separating my yard from his, no more than 12 feet away. The morning light filtered through the leaves, casting uneven shadows across his face, but clear enough to see he was looking directly at me. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't look hostile, but the way he looked, calm, still, it felt like he had been standing there for a long time, like he knew I'd return, and had just been waiting for it. I froze for a few seconds, didn't speak, didn't move, just stared back at him. And in that moment, I understood something. Some looks don't need words, because the look itself is already a warning, not a threat, not like in a horror movie, more like a quiet, cold, deliberate reminder. I know, and I'm still here. I turned and walked back inside. My hands didn't shake, but my chest felt heavy. I kept wondering, if he knew about it all this time, why didn't he say anything? And if he stayed silent for that long, how would I ever know where his limits really were? I stayed in the house less than 10 minutes. As I left, I glanced back one last time. He was gone. Only the old wooden fence remained, and the feeling that I had never really left his line of sight. That night, I checked the camera remotely. Everything looked fine. But I didn't turn the sound on, because I didn't want to hear anything anymore. I stared at the photo for more than 5 minutes. No message. Nothing else. Just one thought that hit instantly. Someone is still nearby, or never left. I called the police. They confirmed. The photo was printed on a basic inkjet, on old photo paper, no readable fingerprints, no additional evidence. I asked them, if Walter really moved away, who still cares about that house? The only answer, a quiet shake of the head. I moved out a month later, left Ellensburg, rented a small apartment in a suburb near Sacramento. Security guards, keycard access, private hallway cameras, everything seemed safe. But the fear wasn't tied to the house's structure. It was in my head. I started sleeping with the bathroom light on. Always kept the bedroom door closed, even during the day. Never sat with my back facing the entrance. I installed cameras in the new apartment, not because I needed them, but because I couldn't live without them anymore. Every night I still opened the old camera app, checked the house in Ellensburg, now owned by someone else. I had no reason to. It's just, I couldn't pull my hand out of the darkness I'd once placed it in. Once, while parked outside a grocery store, I caught a glimpse of a man in a dark jacket standing behind a bus stop across the street. He wasn't looking at me, his face unclear, but the stance, the dropped shoulders, the tilt of his gaze, eerily familiar. I started the engine and drove off immediately. I can't say for sure who it was, maybe coincidence. But the terrifying part is, I can no longer tell what's real and what's just a scar left behind. They say moving is the best way to start over. I used to believe that, but now I know. Some things aren't about the house. They're about memory. They're about the eyes that once watched you every night without you ever knowing. I still live. I still work, buy groceries, talk to friends. But deep down, there's a locked drawer inside me, and carved faintly across it reads, "The one who lived above you may have never left." And maybe there wasn't just one. That's what I've learned in the 6 months since I left the house in Ellensburg. I moved, changed SIM cards, got a new number, cut contact with everyone who ever lived near there. Everything should be over. But if you've ever lived through something that can't be explained by logic, you'll understand. What you've seen doesn't just vanish. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from nightmares, not from stress. It's just my mind wouldn't stop imagining things on the ceiling. Even though the new apartment had no attic, I still looked up, out of reflex. At 3:41 a.m., I sat in the living room, all the lights off, except for the kitchen light casting a soft yellow across the wall. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I picked up my phone, checked the camera log. Nothing unusual. I opened the drawer, pulled out the notebook. Inside it, I've written down everything. Every dream, every feeling of being watched, every small sound. I sat down to write, until I heard something. Not from the door, not from the window, not from the hallway, from the ceiling. Just a whisper, soft, like a breath, and very clear. "I'm still here." I looked up. No one there. I turned on every light. Nothing. I called the front desk. No one came upstairs. No doors were opened. No other guests reported anything. But I knew. I knew that voice wasn't in my head. I'd heard him cough softly when he was living above me. I'd heard the sound of his hand dragging across the wooden boards. And that night, in a place no one knew I lived, I heard him again. I left the apartment the next morning. Didn't ask for my deposit back. Didn't explain anything to management. Since then, I haven't installed cameras again. I don't check the app anymore. I don't leave the kitchen light on at night. I don't try to control it anymore. Because I've learned some fears never go away. They just learn how to whisper. And maybe, right when you think you've escaped, they're sitting quietly above you, listening to every single word you tell yourself. This story has no ending, because once you've been watched inside your own home, you're never truly alone again.